He created the Model T, right? So, at that point in time, was there anyone else making automobiles? No. So, if you wanted to buy an automobile, who did you have to buy it from? Ford Company, right? Makes sense. If something went wrong with that automobile, who'd you have to go take it to fix it? Ford Company, right? If you wanted a newer one, anything that had to do with a automobile, it came from Henry Ford. Does that make sense? So he basically created a monopoly where he controlled all the resources to that one good. Does that make sense? And that's illegal nowadays because we don't want one company controlling the entire resource of a good, because if they own all of it, are we setting prices? No, the business would be, and that's bad for competition. Okay? So, to kind of get this started, at the top, just put down this is SOL 2I, and I swear we're about through 2. Promise we're about through 2. And just label it Monopolies and Collusion. We're going to talk about a couple things in here, but those are the biggest ideas. That we're going to refer to. Okay, so monopolies and collusion. So basically, guys, we're going to talk about how monopolies and the collusion among sellers eliminates competition, and then in industries with less competition, prices are likely to be higher. That's the kind of the understanding. Okay, so the first thing I would like for you to jot down underneath monopoly and collusion is not necessarily the definition, but what they do. Okay. So put down that both of them eliminate competition. They eliminate competition. And again, if competition is eliminated, then we don't have a say-so in what's being made. We don't have a say-so in the price of it, and that's not good for the consumer. And then it says with industries with less competition, prices are likely to be higher. So if this eliminates competition, put down that prices increase. Okay? If monopolies eliminate competition, then usually prices increase. So far, so simple? Makes sense? Alright. Now, so basically we've got to answer what the characteristics of competitive and uncompetitive markets are. What's an industry? What is collusion? And what prices affect the markets would make more competitive and less competitive. So this is not hard, okay? We'll make it easy. So the first thing we're going to talk about is an industry. So write down the word industry. All right, so an industry, guys, put down is a distinct group. Now, what do you think I mean by the word distinct here?
They make their own, right?
Yeah, they kind of make the same thing. Like the example that I've given you here is the automobile industry. So, an industry, and if we're pertaining to automobiles, it would be like Ford, Chevrolet, Toyota, Nissan, whatever, Jeep. That's all an industry because they make a product that is similar. You guys with me? So an industry is a distinct group, and we're not going to write all that out. We're going to put down a distinct group of businesses. I don't have to get you to make that they're trying to make a profit, because guys, what are businesses made to do? They're trying to make money, so we don't have to write that out. So an industry is a distinct group of businesses that share similar products and services. They share similar products and services. Now, obviously, there's more than just the automobile industry. Give me an example of another. Could like Nike, Under Armour, Reebok, Adidas, all that be considered an industry? Don't they share some of probably the same resources to make things? What else could be an industry? What's that? Yeah, Abercrombie, Hollister, whatever you guys like to wear now. Calvin Klein, I see. So those are all industries that share similar products and services. Okay? So the next part of this we're going to talk about is how are prices affected when markets are more competitive or less competitive. And you're going to notice there's about 3 of these slides that look the same. Okay? Maybe 4. No, there's 3 of them. Okay? So let's not make this where we have to write out a bunch. Let's make it simple. So how are prices affected when markets are more competitive? Okay? So it says the level of competition in an industry is affected by the ease with which new producers can enter the industry and by consumers' information about the availability, price, and quantity of substitute goods and services. Now that's a whole lot that don't make a lot of sense, does it? So the first thing I want you to put down in your notes is the words more competitive. We're going to make a little chart. More competitive. Same line, move over, write down less competitive. And we're just going to kind of make a list of what happens. All right. So, an industry that is more competitive, is it going to be easier or more difficult for someone to come into that industry and start making something? Think about it. If the industry is doing well, would it be easier for another company to come into it and start making some of the similar products? Because what is that doing? It's creating what?
Competition.
More competition, right? So, underneath more competitive, where it says up there, industry is affected by the ease in which new producers can enter the industry, put down it's easier to enter industry. Under more competitive, it's easier to enter industry. The more competitive an industry is, the easier it is to create a business in it because competition is a good thing. Y'all with me? Okay, so on the flip side of that, underneath less competitive, put down that it's harder to enter the industry. Okay, it's harder to enter that way because there's not as much going on, so competition is low. So far, so simple. So, the next thing it says up there is consumers' information about price and quantity. Or you have, how do I put this? And consumers' information about the availability, price, and quantity of substitute goods and services. What that means is this. If I can't buy what I really want, like say we're in the automobile industry and I really want a Lamborghini, you know what I mean? But I can't buy one of those because of the expense of it. But there's available information on Chevrolets, Fords, truck, whatever there is out there. Then I'm getting told that I can buy a substitute good or service. If all that is good, then it's in a more competitive industry. You guys with me? So put down underneath good again, underneath more competitive. Put down that information is available to consumers. So info available to consumers. And the things we want to know are like price, quantity, and availability. You guys understand what I'm getting at there? The more competitive it is, all this information is given to us. Do we have that information in our market? In America? Do you think we could, if I wanted to buy a certain type of car, could I look up that certain type of car and bam, I know the price, I know how if I can get it, and I know how many a certain store has? Yeah, very easily, right? I could look up Bob King Mitsubishi and know exactly what they got going on there. Or, you know, there's a ton of these places in Mount area. We got Jeff Johnson's here, right? So I can look all that up, find it really easily. In a less competitive market, put down the information is harder to gain. So info is harder to gain for consumers. And it's harder to gain, guys, because there's not as many businesses in it. It's less competitive, okay? Is everybody with me so far? Is this somewhat understandable? Makes sense? All right. This next part is basically what you already wrote down. It says markets with perfect competition have many buyers and with perfect information and sellers all selling identical products. So in a perfect world where there's a lot of competition, there's a bunch of buyers and there's a bunch of sellers, and they all have information. You guys understand that? It says no, the sellers here have no control over the market price. If you'll notice this right here where it says sellers have no market power. That is what I need you to write down underneath more competitive. Okay? Who are the sellers in this idea? Businesses, right? Producers. Sellers have no control or no market power. And what do I mean by that? Who is setting the price for products in a more competitive market? Consumers. So put down consumers set prices. And we've talked all about that. Okay? All right. And then when it says when there are few sellers, which means that there's less competition, competition is limited and producers are able to gain more control of the market. So underneath less competition, we're going to jot down that producers are able to gain control of the market. So basically producers set market price. Now, we've compared and contrasted a more competitive and a less competitive economy, okay? Which one of these two do you think would be a better one for consumers to be living in? Obviously, a more competitive. That's not hard. Now, underneath less competitive, we need to jot down a couple words, which takes us back to the title of our chart here. So, underneath less competitive, put down this is where you get creations of monopolies. So you have monopolies. And collusion going on here. And we're going to talk about what those actually are now. Okay? So you have monopolies and collusion in less competitive markets. Okay? So, it says a monopoly has one supplier of a product. The seller here has market power and can control both price and quantity. So, down below everything we just did, write down the word monopoly. We're going to define it. And you will need to know this definition for test and quiz purposes. Okay? As a matter of fact, you'll probably have a quiz on Thursday with the rest of SOL too. Like this is it, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. No, we got one more little section. So yeah, Thursday. We'll go through circular flow tomorrow. So, a monopoly, put down when there is one supplier of a product. One supplier of a product. Does anybody know of a company around here in Carroll County that has created a monopoly? Every single one of us have it in our homes.
Appalachian Power.
I'm sorry?
Appalachian Power.
Appalachian Power, yes. Does anybody else have any other type of power? No. So in a sense, obviously everybody needs power, right? But our government decided that Appalachian Power would be the best one. Now don't get me wrong here. The government puts regulations on AEP on how much they can charge. You understand what I'm saying? But let's just say, for example purposes, they didn't. And everybody has to use AEP. If everyone has to use them, do they get to set the market and price and quantity of what they're selling? Yes. That's not good because they can make it as high as they want to, and since there's no competitive person or no competitive company against them, then they can do what they want to. So, beside a monopoly, put down you have one supplier of a product, and then it says that seller has market power and can control both price and quantity. So put down that they control price and quantity. That is not good for the consumer. A monopoly is not good. Okay? So a monopoly is when one supplier of a product controls price and it controls how much is being put out. Okay? Now, if you'll go all the way to the bottom of this chart, it says in the absence of competition, when you have a monopoly, is competition absent? Yes, because you have one supplier, right? It says government regulations may then be used to try to control price, output, and quality. So the last thing I would like for you to jot down underneath monopoly is put down that government regulations may be used. Because if they don't, they're putting us in a bind. Okay? So government regulations can be used. Do you guys think of anybody else? I know I gave you AEP. AEP has government regulations. They can only charge so much for power because the government told them that. Y'all with me? Can y'all think of anybody in time, over time, that's created monopolies? You guys learned about them. Henry Ford done it with the T model, right? Because nobody else was making it. Who?
John D.
Rockefeller done it with oil, right? Andrew Carnegie done it with what?
Coal.
Steel. Coal, yeah. So they all created a monopoly because they owned all the resources to a business. The government stepped in and said, you're going to have to share some of your resources or we're going to put a lot of sanctions on you. So what do they end up doing? They sell some of their resources, make profit off of it, and everybody gets to make money. Y'all with me? That helps us, the consumer. Okay? So that's what a monopoly is. Everybody good with that? Makes sense? All right. And then the last word that I need you to remember here is the word collusion. So just write it down. And collusion is very similar to a monopoly, but it's more than one person doing it or more than one company doing it. It says about the third chart down, or third paragraph down there, it says that it occurs when competing firms make a secret agreement to try to control the market. So what happens when collusion happens is when you have 2, maybe 3, 4 big businesses that control the vast majority of a resource. They come together and don't tell anybody about it and try to set market price for their products. They're like, hey, we all own 98% of this stuff. Why don't we say we're going to sell it for X amount of money instead of them, because they'll have to buy it because we're the ones that own all of it. You got me? So collusion, put down that it's a secret agreement between companies. Okay? And this agreement is to try to control the market. And what I mean by control the market is price and quantity. To try and control the market. Okay? Last thing underneath collusion, put down that it is illegal. You cannot do this in the United States. Because if you have companies joining forces to try to set the market value of a good or service, who's actually setting the price at that point? The businesses is, and they don't. The government don't want that. They want us setting the prices. Okay, so just to give an idea with 2I, the SOL 2I, you need to know what monopoly and collusion mean, which we just talked about, and then know what the difference between the more and the less competitive market are. Okay. Obviously, the more competitive, the easier it is to get into it, and it's better for us. The less competitive, that's where you have your monopolies and your collusion happening, because there's somebody's trying to control things. Okay? Does anybody have any questions about that? All right, tomorrow I will get you the circular flow notes. Actually, that'll be Thursday, because I'll talk about it with B-Day. Okay? That is the end of SOL 2. I will probably create the test for SOL 2 on Friday, and I'll send it to you guys, and it'll be due on Monday for you all. Okay? But that's the initial plan right now. Okay? Does anybody have any questions about those notes? Is everybody cool with the investment things I've been talking about? I know I'm kind of skipping back and forth on you, but I'm just trying to make sure I hit all the notes before y'all have your test at the end of the semester. Okay? Is everybody good there? Any questions? Okay, cool.